Okay. Welcome to the Creative Academy, your go-to source for accountability, coaching, and community for writers. I'm Donna Barker, and today I am speaking to Gregory Brown, who is a new member of the Creative Academy and who has got a great deal of experience as an award-winning short story writer. And so I want to talk to him today, or we're going to talk today, about short stories and contests, and using contests to help move your writing career forward, and whatever else we end up talking about. So, Gregory Brown, welcome to the Creative Academy.
Thank you for having me.
I would love to start with acknowledging your most recent win. You've had a couple of really exceptional short story wins in the last 30 days. So tell me about those.
Yeah, it's been a very exciting summer. Last month, I found out that I won the 2018 Grouse Grind Lit Prize for Short Fiction, which is a contest run by Prism International, which is UBC's literary journal. And then more recently, discovered that two of my stories had been longlisted for the Journey Prize, which is Canada's premier prize for emerging short story writers. So that was just incredibly exciting. Yeah,
that it really truly is. It really truly is. And that Journey Prize, is that what it's called?
Yep.
Okay. That was for, or that is for, short stories that have been previously published in magazines or in journals, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So the two stories that I had actually both appeared in Pulp Literature, which is a Vancouver-based journal. So they've been previously published, and then now since then it's been longlisted for this just amazing prize. I mean, I could go on a little bit.
Well, what makes it amazing? So, I mean, since we're talking about contests and short stories, what makes that particular prize an amazing one?
For me, it's partly because the list of writers who've been featured in it, either as winners or just in the prize anthology, are among some of my favorites. They're people that I've been reading for the better part of my adult life, whose work I just totally admire. People like Jan Martel, who wrote Life of Pi, Michael Crummy, who's a Newfoundland writer who wrote River Thieves and Galore, two of my favorite books. People like Eden Robinson, who wrote Monkey Beach and also Son of a Trickster, just a list of like the brightest and most exciting writers in Canada, people whose work I just totally love. So to get to be a part of that, even in a small way, just feels hugely exciting.
That's fantastic. Yay, that's so great.
Yeah.
So aside from Pulp Literature, which shout out to Susan Peters, who is one of the editors of that fabulous publication, where else has your work been featured? Your short.
Well, it's I've got a story coming out in Prism as part of this other contest. I had a short story come out in a very small journal in Newfoundland called Paragon, and then otherwise, mostly I've been publishing essays and reviews and such. So I really, as far as short stories go, like really four. So my return is pretty good.
Well, I was going to say, what is your ratio of short story writing to the other type of writing that you do?
I consider the story writing to be primarily what I'm interested in, although I've published a lot more of the other stuff.
Tell me a little bit about the other stuff you publish.
Book reviews, some essays. I was a correspondent for a podcast where I did book reviews for them, so that was sort of writing and also speaking, I guess.
Yeah.
But primarily I consider the lion's share of what I'm interested in and also what I do to be short story writing.
I am amazed at the skill it takes to write short. I cannot write short. I can't even write a short email. I'm so inept with writing short.
I think, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to say, and I read your the Grouse Grind contest. Mm-hmm. Is that what is it called? The Grouse Grind contest?
Yeah, it's the Grouse Grind Lit Prize for very short forms.
There you go.
It's a
That's
very long title for a
for a
very,
very short story.
yeah.
Exactly. And I read that story, which is available online and which is linked below for people to access. And that's one that's going to be published in Prism, right?
Correct, yeah, in their fall issue this year.
It stunned me. It's called The Bird Nest or Bird Nest?
Birdhouse.
Birdhouse.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Birdhouse.
That's okay.
So it's got anyway. You have to read it, and it takes about a minute and a half to read. But it took me from, as all short stories do, a place of where is this going? Where's this going? And then like right into the gut. Like it truly moved me. In what, like 200 words?
Yeah, I think it's just shy of 300. I think that was the cap.
Like, how do you do that? How do you grab someone's emotions in that short of a space? Like,
what you want to know the secret? I
want to know like, how do you write? Like,
I think partly, well, okay, I've got two. One answer is probably not very helpful, but I'll share it, which is that I think on some level, people are like metabolically or temperamentally disposed to writing either long or short.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, sure. I know that that particular story, which again exists now at 300 words, at a certain point was maybe 3,000 or 1,500, and for me, like the process of revising it was really condensing and condensing and condensing. But I don't really honestly work in very large spaces. Like I think the longest story I've written maybe is 7,000 words, but mostly they're under 5,000, which for a short story is quite small.
So the trick, what's the trick of
the trick, right? The trick.
Somebody.
I think partly it's just paying attention to these are good. I don't know if these answers will be helpful, but I think partly it's about paying attention to what feels most urgent moment to moment. And I think partly about letting, about sort of, how to put this, about cutting away anything that's not going to lead the reader into the next most urgent thing. Yeah. And I guess maybe being a little bit cutthroat about how you edit. Yeah. Just like throwing away.
You're making it sound so easy. Editing, that's easy. Cutting out the words that you don't need, that's easy. And yet, in 300 words, you made me really feel something. So anyway, I just...
That's very sweet to hear. I don't know if I'm answering your question very well.
You're totally answering the question, because it's probably a totally unfair question. And
no, I think it's a very fair question, and probably I should be a little bit more considered about how I'm approaching these things. But I do really think that for me, it's about I think there's a lot of technical things to know about writing, about how sentences work, or about how dialogue works, or about even how plots fit together. And I spent a lot of time studying that stuff. But I think when you're down in the muck trying to figure it all out, it's much better just to pay attention to what's emotionally most urgent or compelling, and getting to that. I think in the same way that, like, here's a good analogy. Like, I think it was, now I'm going to get this mixed up. It was either Kurt Vonnegut or somebody talking about Kurt Vonnegut that said that, like, a joke is just telling the truth as quickly as possible, in as short as line, and because you have to jump past all of the stuff that we put up between ourselves and the truth. And I think maybe the same goes for a really good short story, is you have to get to the truth of what's important as quickly as possible. Technically, that means like cutting out as much backstory as possible. I think that's something, there's some practical advice. Just cutting out anything that doesn't, I think I have a tendency, I think, also to fill in, especially in a first draft, a lot of backstory. And then the process of editing is just cutting all that stuff away.
So the 3,000 word version of the 300 word super short story, what did you do with that? Does that still exist?
Sure. Yeah. Something I tell my own students is I teach, in the summers I teach high school students, who are really ambitious and excited and want to figure out how to do all of this stuff. And they have a really hard time editing, in part because they just don't know where to cut, what to cut. But one thing that I've taught myself, I guess, or figured out, or maybe let myself believe, is that just cutting backstory is so. I'm not answering your question. Let me answer your question. The longer version of the story, there was a lot more. There were some longer scenes that spent a lot more time developing some of the interpersonal relationships between the various characters. Like, there's a lot more other stuff happening, but it seemed to me, in looking at the story again, that really what I was trying to get to was there's a memory at the very end of that story, and I was trying to figure out how to get to that memory as quickly as possible. And I realized that I didn't need all of this other stuff going on, that if I just found myself as quickly as possible into that moment, that the story might be able to land a little bit more powerfully.
So will that 3,000 word version ever find readers?
Oh,
will you share it?
I don't know.
Or was that just, that's what you needed to write to get to the 300?
Probably. Yeah, I think that's probably how it works for me. That there's a lot of, I think I write a lot. I mean, I write, if I can, every day, and if I can write every day, usually for 3 or 4 hours. And a lot of that stuff just goes in the garbage can.
But you're right, it's okay.
Not in the garbage can.
No.
That's what I was gonna say. I don't delete anything. Nothing gets deleted. It's very easy to open up another Word document and story.
No, but what I meant was, will it be shit? Like, I didn't mean, is it trash? But is it a piece of itself that will find a place in the world? So,
who knows?
Yeah,
I don't know. Cool. I think that things often get recycled into other stuff. I know, like the memory in this story is something that I tried putting in another story many years ago, and it didn't quite work. So, and
I imagine, and the characters in 300 words, you've got more than one character, and they're compelling characters in the tiny little bits that we know about them. So I can totally see that there would be a potential to I mean, I can just imagine the conversations that you've cut out. Okay, let's carry on.
Sure. Sure. Sorry,
you don't have to apologize. I'm the one who's going, so when you might have alluded to an answer to this. How many contests have you entered? What kind of experience do you have with entering contests?
Not a lot, frankly.
Okay, so you're the writer that we look at and go, either we love you because we go, or we hate you because it's like, oh.
No, I think I've entered, in addition to the Prism contest and the Journey Prize, which is, we'll probably have to talk a little bit more about that, because on some level I didn't. Wow,
it was entered for you?
It was entered for me, but I've entered one other contest and heard absolutely nothing back from it. But so few. So
few and okay, all right.
But I think I mean few.
Look, you don't have to apologize for that.
Well, I think you're right that on some level it feels like kind of just like dumb luck.
Well, or you've been writing for, how long have you been writing? And you say you write 3 to 4 hours a day.
Yeah, I mean, I try to, if I can. I mean, my schedule doesn't always allow it, but I have sort of designed my life in a way to account, or to make room for some of that stuff. But how long? I mean, I've been writing in a serious way since I was 25, maybe, about 10 years.
Yeah.
And I with some pauses and not, and I think it's taken me a long time to figure a lot of this stuff out. Partly because I did it by myself mostly.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's funny when people say it's taken me a long time, and you've literally only been doing this for 10 years, which in the context of learning a skill isn't very long.
No,
really.
It's not. Yeah, that's a good point. It's not very long. But it feels long, I think, because when you start, and again, this is something I encounter a lot in my own students, like most of them have been writing, well, some of them have been writing for 10 years also, but a lot of them have just come to it. And they have a lot of anxious energy around getting published right away. Like there's this real impulse. I don't know if they're getting that from their parents or from other writers or themselves, but there is like a lot of energy around like, well, if I'm not getting published, like I'm obviously not a writer, and it's not until you get published that you start feeling as though that identity is being confirmed for you. So 10 years of like trying to figure out how to become the thing that you already think you are that's a long time to wait for something.
It is. Yeah. Well, that is true. Okay. So why did you enter? I understand that you had the other two short stories entered on your behalf.
Yes.
What do you think? What?
No, go ahead.
What do you think the value of entering contests is? What are you hoping to get out of having won these two prizes? Or not prizes, but you know.
Yeah, I don't. Not to sound too like high-minded or lofty about it, but on some level, I don't like. There's cash money, but I don't really care about that stuff. Like that's not a reason to do. I think the reason to do it is to, like, on some level, the same reason you submit stories anywhere, which is to find a readership. But I think it's also probably professionally advantageous to be entering and winning contests. One thing that's come out of the Journey Prize nomination is that I was just contacted earlier this week by an agent who was asking after whether I would be interested in talking to her about possibly coming on as a client, which is that's really exciting. Yeah, it's really exciting. So I think there's a certain amount of like professional profile raising that can happen as a result of winning contests. If that's an objective you had, I don't think that was my goal necessarily in submitting. Certainly not to the Prism short story prize. Truthfully, partly, that story is so small, and it's sometimes hard to find venues, I think, for flash fiction. So sending flash fiction into contests is often the way that you get those things published.
Right. And I was going to say, so, you've had the very good fortune of having been, not even won it yet, but having 2 nominations. 2 out of, how many are there? 16? Something like that?
There are 12 writers. There are 13 stories. And
12 writers.
Yeah.
Okay, because you have 2 of them. So just by shortlisting an agent interested in you. Now, you may or may not know an answer to this, but quality. So entering contests, it makes a difference what contests you're entering, because I could enter a contest that gets me no results, not because my story isn't good, but because that contest doesn't have the profile that the one you've just been shortlisted for does.
Correct.
So
you have a question? There's no question.
There is no question there. There seems to be no question there.
But the other thing is that there are a ton of, like, I don't know, there are a ton of contests, and it's often a good way of getting your foot in the door of magazines where it might be harder to get out of the slush pile. Like, there are a lot of really great literary journals that, getting published in is quite prestigious, but it's hard sometimes to make it out of the slush pile unless you know somebody or unless you're connected in some way. And I think the prize gives you the prize credit, and also maybe opens up some doors, because they don't. Typically, I think they probably get many fewer submissions than they do the sort of more mainstream part of the magazine. Does that make sense? That makes sense.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay. All I'm saying is that it just seems like they typically, I think, get many fewer submissions for the prizes than they do because you also have to pay. That's the other part of this. There's a submission or a prize. Most
contests do have a submission fee. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not true necessarily for submitting
to literary magazines.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Darn, I had a question and now I've lost it. Okay. It may come back. Let me see. So do you have any opinion or thoughts about who is judging a contest?
Oh, sure.
Okay, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I've been talking with a friend of mine who's getting he's got a really amazing story, also very, very short, and he was asking after whether to submit it, and he and I were talking about a number of different contests, and the ones we landed on were the ones that were being judged by writers whose work we know and admire. And I think probably knowing who the judges are gives you some kind of inside scoop maybe on whether your story has a shot. But it also, again, thinking professionally, there's probably like making that connection is probably important if there's a writer who you know who you maybe like to connect with.
Okay, so how do you know when one of your stories is ready to be submitted then?
I think, well, my official line, again, this is something I tell my own students, is that when you've exhausted everything you think you can do with it in terms of revision, that's one answer.
And do you actually believe that? Does that time come?
I think it's true. I think at a certain point, I'll just get tired of working on something, and decide that that's when it's ready. But I think the other thing that I think often too about is Alice Munro, whose work I know and love, is always revising her work. Like stories that come out in the New Yorker, say, will when they're published in collections, she'll have spent a lot of time revising them. Then they will maybe later get anthologized, and they'll be different yet again. Like I don't think she's a perennial tinkerer, and that I think I have found helpful to remind myself of that. On some level, this stuff is never done. You just move on from it. You could work. I have projects that I've been tinkering with for many, many years, and maybe they'll never be done. I don't frankly know when something is done. I know that I can let go of it when it gets published.
Okay, fair enough.
But because I don't know. Like, what are the standards that we're using to assess whether something is done? I mean, there's.
I think when you just answered it, for me, it's like, because for me, done is a psychological state. Because of course, we can always do more, better, change. Like it's a story. Or in my case, it's nonfiction. I can always do more research. I can always put more stuff in.
Yeah.
For me, it's definitely, I think it comes from a psychological answer.
Yeah. One thing that we don't get to do a lot of, and I wish that I just wish that there were more opportunity for it, is sort of like testing these things with an audience. In the summers, for instance, I get to read a few times to a large audience.
Your work you get to read.
I get to read my own work to a large audience, and it's really valuable to see people's reactions in real time, to sort of start thinking about how, like, what parts of the story are working, what parts of the story need more work. Because I think so much of the work otherwise happens in solitude, and I actually sort of believe that we're all individually our own worst readers. Like I think we often understand our work the least, which means that, again, that I'm not always certain when a thing is done.
Right.
I can usually tell just by my own feeling about wanting to move on, and then also if it gets published, then I guess I can stop worrying about it.
Right. Do you work with an editor at all with your short stories?
I don't, but I do have a writing group that I work. So I've got readers. I don't have an editor, but I do have a group of readers, people who I met in graduate school, mostly, and then a few readers I've met since then, whose opinions I trust, and who I can trust to be candid when I need candor, but also supportive if that's what I'm in need of. Right. I think I sort of alluded to earlier the fact that it's felt like it's taken a really long time to learn a lot of what I've learned about this stuff. And I think partly that was because I spent a large amount of time by myself trying to figure it out. And I think one of the things that it took me a really long time to find was a community, like a community of other writers, again, whose opinions I can rely on.
In terms of advice, do you have advice on whether it makes sense to be submitting your work to magazines and contests concurrently, or do you think that there's an order that makes better sense?
So much of publishing is a numbers game, and it's really about sending your work out to as many places as you think will want it. But the odds of any of that stuff getting picked up is so small that I think you really should be submitting anywhere and everywhere that you think will want your work.
Okay.
Yeah.
A try this or don't try this at home advice from Gregory Brown. Okay, so
can I make a qualification maybe? What
absolutely.
I would say also is that you shouldn't just like sit down, make a list of places and send all of those places. What I actually do is I make a list of the top places that I want to get into, send there. If they don't get picked up, then I go to the next. Like, yeah, I do have a bit of a tiered system around where I want to be published.
Okay, but that makes a whole lot of sense. So if you're writing for hours a day,
yep, where
in the world are you getting your ideas from for your short stories?
Oh, that's a really tricky question, truthfully. Also a question that students ask in the summers, and my answer is to refer to them to an essay by Stephen King, and it was a foreword to a short story anthology of his whose title escapes me right now, but he talks about how every writer is a net. Every writer is a net, and every day that net gets dipped into like a stream that's full of weird things, like some garbage, some interesting, beautiful knickknacks. And every day you pull the net out and there's a bunch of stuff stuck in it. And whatever the stuff is will be interesting to that writer. But the thing is that not every net is the same shape. Like the holes in the net are different sizes. And actually you or I don't get any real choice in what sticks in our net. It's just whatever the shape of our net is will catch certain things. And really, it's the writer's job just to put their antennae out and to try to be aware of those moments during the day where something like kind of clicks for you. So I actually walk around with a little notebook and write down things as they come to me, whether they're like more concretely ideas for stories, or maybe whether just like little blips of memory or thought that strike me as interesting. So oftentimes when I'm working, I'll go to that journal for inspiration or idea, but I don't know where the ideas actually come from. I think I think anything you're making is probably a synthesis of other books you've read, ideas, memories, things that have happened to you even that day. I think just our responsibility to pay attention to what's most meaningful or interesting to us. I think it's on some level it's just about awareness. It's about being aware of what you find interesting. So,
what is that quote? Your job is to either, what is it? Live an interesting life, or rats. Now I've totally forgotten it. But something to do with the living and writing. You know, that you're not going to be able to write interesting things unless you're thinking and living interesting. I should probably find that and put it below because it's embarrassing.
I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is I think anything could be interesting. In fact, one of my favorite novels of all time is about a man riding an escalator, and the book begins where he's already gotten on the escalator, and it ends and he's almost gotten off the escalator. So that the span of present time in that novel is him almost getting off. The journey of the story is him almost arriving at the top of the escalator. And by all accounts, the book should not work. But there's, the attention with which the author evokes the consciousness of this character, the language that gets deployed to describe his memory and thinking is just really so engaging. So I don't. I guess what I'm trying to say is interesting can mean a lot of things.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I learned a new word yesterday, and then I wrote for an hour about the new word that I learned yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, because it just triggered something in me that I'm trying to understand it better, the word and what that means to me, to know this word now.
Can I ask what the word was?
Yeah. Anti-theist.
Oh.
As opposed to a theist or an atheist, it's an anti-theist. And
what? Yeah.
So
is that a person who opposes belief in God?
Yeah, basically. And as I was understanding it, theism is the belief in a higher power. Atheism is not a belief, is not having belief in a higher power, but it's not that you oppose the belief of, or oppose. We understand atheism wrong, is what this person was positing. Because if we look at the way the English language is structured,
right,
when you put an A in front of something, it makes it neutral. It doesn't make it the opposite of.
Right. So then, sorry.
So it's like moral, amoral, immoral.
Right.
Amoral falls in the middle. Atheism falls between theism and anti-theism.
Right.
But we talk about atheism as though it's the opposite of theism, but it's really just a lack of theism. As opposed to an opposition to it. Anyway, it just had me, because I was thinking of all the different things, that we can apply that language to. And anyway.
It's interesting because so much of our thinking in general, I think, is very dichotomous, or we're really compelled by duality, which is, I think, often, and it just seems part of our monkey brains, maybe. But it just seems really reductive. I think we have this, it can be either this or this. We often forget the spectrum that exists between these two poles.
And it's the unstated third option. And we are totally off track, but maybe this will be interesting for someone's short story.
There's something appealing about the collision of ideas that seem opposed, as opposed to having some shared connective tissue. I think we just really love. Again, I said monkey brain. There's something primitive about the desire to see things smash into each other. I'm a little bit skeptical of.
Well, and makes for good stories, because the story is boring otherwise, I guess, right? I mean, if we bring it back, you kind of need that conflict, even if it's just in the last line of a short story, of someone remembering something. Well, what should I have talked to you about or asked you about short stories or contests that I didn't?
Oh, I don't know. So I do subscribe to Duotrope. I don't know if that's a service that you're familiar with. Yeah,
heard of. You explain it for folks who.
Oh, yeah. So Duotrope is it's an online catalog of basically, I think, every journal in North America, lists based on how much they pay, what their deadlines are, what kind of contests they run. I used to every year I would get what is it called? The writer's guide,
the one that's done by Writer's Digest.
Giant. It's a giant paper anthology, and it's quite expensive. But it's a giant book that tells you all that information. But you can actually Duotrope provides the same service. It's online. It's easy to use. I think it might be $40 a year to subscribe to it. I might be wrong about that, but it's relatively inexpensive.
Yeah.
And one thing it can do is you can track your submissions.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Query tracker if you're looking for an agent and publishers. It also works for publishers, but it doesn't have a very detailed publisher database. The last time I used it, it didn't.
To summarize, I think that submitting to contests is a really good way of getting your work out, raising your profile a little bit. I think it's the kind of stuff that the industry maybe is interested in, like the publishers, editors. One thing actually,
Agent is calling you before you're even.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Jan Martel, who won the Journey Prize, I mean, 15 years ago or 20 years ago or something, talked about how that for him was a turning point. It didn't mean always that he would get something published, but it did mean that editors at magazines or at publishers started paying attention to him and would, if give him a rejection at least, it wouldn't just be a form letter. Like it really did start opening doors. And I think probably that's true for
How exciting! We'll be able to say we knew you when.
Oh,
That's so exciting.
sure.
All right. Gregory Brown, thank you very, very much for taking time to talk to me and for sharing with the other members of the Creative
Of
Academy.
course, totally my pleasure. This was a lot of fun.
And we'll look forward to seeing you sharing your win in, whatever those wins are, right?
Yeah.
This is whether you make it past into the big prize.
Yeah.
Now, does that prize have 1, 2, 3, or is it just one winner?
There's so they announced the short list in the middle of September, and those 3 writers, they'll pick the one winner, but those 3 all get prizes. There are prizes for all.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
And you've got 2 out of 13.
Yeah.
2 out of 13 stories. Yeah. Woohoo! Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Are you a member of the Creative Academy yet? Join us today and unlock a wealth of resources, masterclasses, feedback opportunities, and community events designed to help you reach the next step in your writing journey. No matter what stage you're at, we've got a helping hand to guide you along the way. Check out our free resource room if you'd like to get a taste of how we can help you reach your writing and publishing goals. Thank you for bringing us along on your writing and publishing journey. Crystal, Eileen, and I hope to see you around the Creative Academy soon.